I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joined by Mike Alloy and Mark Bird. They are both sales VPs of Ascent Cloud, and you may be wondering a little bit about, well, who are Ascent Cloud and what they do. Well, considering that one of my guests came from Level 11 and the other from GeoPoint and are now together as part of Ascent Cloud, what I thought I would do is I'd ask them to explain it to you. Mike, why don't we start with you first?
Well, as you asked us earlier, you asked about Level 11 and GeoPoint. Both were companies that were started individually, owned now collectively under the same management, and we retain both Level 11 and GeoPoint naming as our product names, right? So Ascent Cloud is the overarching business that Level 11 and GeoPoint roll up under, and provides industry-leading solutions for sales and customer-facing teams for performance management solutions, geolocation solutions, and everything in between. So we can certainly talk more in detail. But Mark, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we provide, or is there any more detail that you're looking for, Paul?
Well, I'm curious to know, before we get into the topic of today around coaching, is maybe you could share with our viewers and listeners a little bit around the typical challenges that the two companies address. And if we start, maybe jump in, yeah.
Yeah, Level 11 was really founded from a performance management solution to provide coaching solutions and insights to the leaders and individual reps, as well as motivation and engaging solutions that go along hand in hand with the coaching component of Level 11. We've integrated that with GeoPoint now that we're both under one company here, if you will. We've got integration points between our Level 11 performance management suite of applications and our GeoPoint solution, where we can provide geographical and mapping sort of visualization of data that go hand in hand with your performance management and CRM on the Salesforce platform.
Okay. I'm curious from a coaching perspective where it fits in, I guess, because if we consider coaching as a conversation between two people in its most basic format, what does Level 11 or Ascent Cloud add to the party?
Yeah, so Level 11, integrated with your CRM provides the solution that is really a coaching template that allows us to not only pre-schedule coaching, but identify the types of coaching that's going to include the performance scorecard and the key performance indicators that are within that scorecard and the metrics as a snapshot in the coaching solution, but allows us to track tasks and whatnot as part of your overall coaching session that you have. Onboarding is another key component of our coaching solution, again, fully integrated with the CRM. And that all ties together with on the Salesforce platform.
Interesting. Let's talk about coaching then, because I've watched you guys present at the AA-ISP and some other interviews, and my first question, I guess, for you is it deal coaching, or is it performance coaching, or both?
Well, I would jump in and say both. Absolutely both, right? So the beauty of this being fully integrated with the CRM is that you can tie links within the coaching solution for a deal coaching, right, and deal strategy and so on and so forth, right? But you can also structure the coaching template various ways that's really performance based as well, or overarching, right? And a big part of what we deploy from a solution standpoint is our consulting services, because on top of the solution, right? So our solution sits on top of Salesforce, but it really drives an overall program that we drive within the organizations that adopt our program, right? Which is solution and our approach to coaching. As you know, many organizations, feel as if their managers feel as if they're providing coaching. Their reps feel as if the coaching that they get is probably not as valuable as it needs to be, or maybe it's not provided as much as the managers say that it is. But I saw a statistic that says most companies would suggest that, I would say less than 5% of companies would suggest they don't have a structured coaching program. So we drive that structured program, that discipline, and then our solution helps manage that and document it, and then also improves the overall discipline and effectiveness.
Then let's start, maybe Mark, I'll go to you on this one, because it was something I saw that if you could be shocked and surprised in the same moment, that's what it did. And then at some level, not surprised. 83% of managers say they're great coaches. Self-identify, no doubt. 87% of reps say that the coaching they get is worthless or not happening. And that 3% of companies say that they have a coaching strategy. Why the disconnect, first of all? Let's start with that in terms of people's belief that they're doing a great job versus the reality, or perception at least, which is, as we know, reality, that it's worthless or not happening at all. Let's start with that one.
Sure. The first thing that I was coached was that pipeline review does not equal coaching. So that, I guess that took a good half of my 97% out. Like, well, maybe I wasn't exactly coaching. So, that was that first acknowledgement. And then as I did, this is a real challenge. We've seen these stats for a while now, and you're trying to figure out where that gap is. And if I'm providing coaching, and you alluded to this too, am I providing deal coaching? Am I providing prospecting coaching? Am I providing career coaching? Am I providing personal counseling? Am I providing training? Are we reviewing processes? There's a lot of different things that could constitute coaching, and even as you and Tom Castley discussed, or mentoring, right? How am I really influencing the behavior? How am I helping my B rep become an A rep? The task is monumental, I think, is probably where I would go to. And then again, I guess the other topic I would like to bring to that is another part of what I think we do a good job with our module is it can be rep initiated coaching. So they bring their own topics, they bring their own challenges, they bring their own, this is what's on my mind this week, so we can get to the meat of it fairly quickly. And so I think both of those things help move us together, but I'll take your feedback, because you've been around. What do you think the gap is?
Why? I think that so there's a few things. Ask, and again, I'm going to gender this. If you ask any man if to rate themselves as a driver, for example, they'll all rate themselves above average. It's not possible, right? So there's probably an element of that in them. There's an element. I think there's a strong element of what you just said about deal coaching. We think that our pipeline coaching, micromanaging that process, we sometimes think that's coaching. I think that could be, as you said, a large part of it as well. I also think there is a fear on behalf of reps, particularly if they're assigned coach as their manager. Well, if your coach is also your prison guard, and by the way,
well said.
I'm very aware of how that comes across. But in the mind of somebody who's maybe not quite there in terms of their targets, and who's forecast a few deals, really kind of under pressure, and there's no substance to them, and now you have to be coached on those deals, there may be a reluctance to open up and be vulnerable. So yeah, I think there's a whole host of things that I don't think we've really got our arms around this, and so I think there's those challenges need to be solved first. But on the other side, the evidence is clear. I worked with a company a few years ago, and they were embarking on this massive coaching program. They were literally investing millions of dollars in this thing, and as part of it, they went out to an organization to gather data and build a case for coaching. So what they looked at was, and of course they had a lot of historic data. This was a big technology company, and they interviewed reps, and the long and the short of it was there was a clear correlation between reps who did better and those who said they had great coaches. Right? So the evidence was there. The coach, and it was like a 20% uplift. So people who said they had their managers were good coaches, and you put that into one bundle, they were performing 20% higher than those who said their managers weren't coaching. And that was, the number, the size, the sample size was large enough for that to kind of, the margin of error was tiny on it. So the case is there, but there's so many personal human factors that get in the way. Vulnerability on the side of one. I think competence is on the side of the managers as well, both in terms of, okay, if the rep turns to me and asks me, what should I do? Now the monkey's on my back. So I don't know. As I said, I'd like to explore these things because I don't have the answers, that's for sure. I have ideas, but they're as worthless as anybody else's.
I would suggest the biggest gap between the metrics that you mentioned earlier, and that is, the 80-something% of the managers who feel as if they're providing coaching versus the 80-something% of the reps who feel as if they're not receiving coaching, or if they do, it's not as valuable. I would suggest that, you add in the other element of companies that identify they have a structured and a structured coaching program is less than 5%. I think that's where your gap is. I think those managers that feel as if they're providing the coaching are probably doing it in a less structured approach. And the reps feel that, right? And they feel that as if it's not as effective as it can be. When we drive a structured coaching program, we do so in various ways, not only from a discipline and a cadence, but through metrics, right? So we have a performance scorecard that has key metrics, both activities, results, and we integrate that with the coaching program itself, right? So it's structured around, the type of coaching that's being received, around the activities or the metrics that make up the success of the individuals, right? And it's not a one size fits all, because every individual is going to be a little bit different. If you provide the same level of coaching across, as a broad brush across every rep, you're missing the mark, right? You may have some level of effectiveness, but it's going to be much smaller.
Yeah.
And you really got to know your audience.
Yeah.
Right?
My only concern, Mike, as I'm listening to you, is that structured micromanagement is still micromanagement. And that if my concept of coaching is to sit with a rep and go, is this deal a commit? When's it going to happen? How much is it?
Yeah.
If that's their concept of coaching, you can put structure around that, but it's still not getting you anywhere. So I think structure is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of it, but it has to be structuring the right thing. It's like practice. If I'm practicing the guitar the wrong way, I'm still going to play it poorly.
Right. Right. No, and I would agree with that. Mark and I have used this term collaborative strategy sessions, right, as opposed to coaching. It's not so much going into a deal strategy and saying, is it a commit or is it a best case, and trying to drive that home, but having that strategy session in more of a collaborative fashion, right? The structure is really cadence and preparation into each session, right? If you don't have that, you're going to miss the mark, and you're probably wasting some cycles, because you're going into coaching sessions, if you will, unprepared, and it's going to be less effective coming out.
Yep. I'd be curious to know, Mark, your thoughts on this. How can I trust somebody? So if my manager is my coach, which is what happens in a lot of organizations, to have my best interest at heart when they've also got their own agenda?
Yeah, that I don't know if I could coach you on that. I mean, it's that's the reality of the game, I would say. Those trust is a different topic here. Probably a good podcast topic. In terms of how do you build that? How do you I guess in a lot of cases in those relationships, I think trust comes through alignment. We're swimming in the same direction to the same place. But yeah, if you are distrustful of your manager, that is a whole different problem than the kind of the type of coaching that we're trying to provide. And maybe I'll tie this back to what Mike was saying in terms of, a rep that I've been with for 5 years is different than a rep that I've been with for 5 weeks or for 5 months, and what they need from me. And I mean, I'm a sales guy. Everything comes back to a sale, but I always want to establish trust. Isn't that the first thing we're trying to do, is to be credible and be problem solvers for them? And candidly, I approach my team in the same way, but I guess if your manager doesn't approach it in that way, and I know reps are naturally skeptical. I don't know how to handle that one.
I don't know. Maybe it's down to company culture as well. I do remember I was giving a class a few years ago, and this guy came to me in a bit of a fluster that he'd gotten a call from his manager telling him that he needed to pull a deal in from the following quarter back into this quarter. And I said, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, I'm just going to have to offer a big discount to get it back in. And I said, why is this happening? And what had transpired was that one of his colleagues had a deal fall through. Now, that didn't impact him, the guy I'm talking to personally, but it did impact the manager. And so the manager turned to another rep, the guy in my class, saying, okay, I need you to fill this hole for me.
Yeah.
And to my mind, that's like stealing somebody's commission from them. And they have that power. And so in situations like that, now that was very much part of the company culture. And so therefore I wonder, is there certain company cultures that just makes coaching really difficult for it to happen at all? And I'd be curious to know your experience on that. When you go into companies, do you see some companies that just go, look, it's just not going to work here, it's not right? And I guess the flip side of that is, when you go in and see a company and you're able to see evidence of A, B, and C, you go, this is going to work here, absolutely. And what would those A, B, and C's be that you see?
Yeah,
well, I would start with, sometimes we can see it right away, and sometimes it takes time to see it as we get to know, our customers and our prospects. But going back to your culture comment, I absolutely think that culture can drive, those, I'll call them negative situations that you described, right? And it becomes very difficult to then earn trust if those managers are then driving that negative culture down into the reps, right? And it's not a recipe for success. But at the same time, I also believe that managers can fight through that level of culture and recognize that their coaching and their approach on a rep to rep basis isn't so much about the negative culture. I think that really comes down to the manager, if anything, fighting through those type of situations.
Okay.
Not driving that down to the individual contributors or the reps, if you will.
Yeah. So what about the criteria then, that when you see it, that has to be in place for a successful coaching intervention to happen?
I think it starts with top-down management's adoption, and they're believers in that they need this to happen. They need a coaching discipline. They trust in what we're bringing to the table to work with them and drive that in. And if the top level managers are bought into it, they're investing in the time and the effort of their people to drive it, right? Because we can come in, we can consult, we can deploy our solutions and do very well in that aspect. But if they're not driving it top down from a culture standpoint and investing the people to adopt a program, it's probably fall through the cracks. It's not going to be effective either.
Well, speaking of top down then, is there a correlation between you go into a company and you say to the CEO, well, who's your coach? Or you look at the around the boardroom and you say, where's your coaches? Is there any correlation between there? If there's an absence of coaching at the top table, then even though there's an initiative, is like, look, this is not my problem, it's their problem, they need to solve it. And I'm just wondering, is there something there? Because I often wonder that companies who buy into the idea of coaching does it last if the senior team also don't have coaches?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you led off with a 20% uplift across my team without adding headcount. I mean, everybody's listening, right? We know there's value in coaching, and you're pointing to a scenario where there's not trust in the organization. We don't think coaching is happening. You know, somebody, to Mike's point, has to make a decision that they want something to be different. You know, is there enough pain, you know, where no decision is not an option, you know, per Tom Castley, and where do we go from here? And so, you know, a solution like we provide does give you some structure. It does, you know, I can confirm that managers are having coaching sessions. I can see what types of questions are being, you know, again, as I started coaching, I was writing notes on paper. I was starting a Google document. Those were all lost, you know, leading to Groundhog Day and similar conversations and lack of accountability and lack of, you know, kind of, how can I show the organization this is working? So, you know, if there's a belief that this works, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you know, managers will adopt this, it's, you know, if you want to look at yourself as a manager, as a coach that wants to improve your talent and make your people better, you have to have a coaching mentality. And so how do I infect that? I don't know what to say. You know, it's you know, this is what we sell. This is what we bring to the game.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that too, just a little bit, going down to the individual reps and even talking about, you know, our organization. Mark and I spend time coaching our reps, but our reps also know that we're being coached as well, right? And that's important because from an adoption standpoint and driving that culture, that the coaching isn't just happening at the individual contributor level. It's happening at the management level and even the senior management level. I think that's important from a culture standpoint, because then you get adoption across the entire organization.
So what I'm hearing is culture is important, mindset is important. I'm curious also that when you look at it at a rep and manager level, is it something that is there a perception in organizations you talk to that coaching is an intervention for people who may be on some sort of PIP, some performance improvement plan, and therefore it's remedial in nature? Or is it seen as something that's a reward and that it's going to take you from a level 8 to a level 9 rep? And my guess is you probably see both. Sure. And I'm curious to know, is there one that's more prevalent than the other?
Yeah,
Mark.
You bring all that. You bring a lot of expectations into these conversations, and it's hard. Yeah, I mean, for those of us that have drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, you know, those of us that have, you know, been Sandler trained, we're curious and we know we need to improve. We know we need to ask questions. We know we need to get better every day. And people that have a fixed mindset that I already know what I need to know, my team already knows what they need to know. I mean, that they're not a good candidate for what we do, you know, candidly. And I know there's cultures like that are quite successful. So, you know, more power to them. We think we have a better way, and we think the data bears it out. I'm going to pose a different question back to you around, you know, so we're talking about senior managers that don't have coaching, but what about a brand new manager who I was your peer yesterday and now I'm your manager today? How am I to build trust with you? How are we going to get to work together to make you more successful when maybe you even thought you should have my job, you know, as of 2 weeks ago? And, you know, so, you know, versus how I, you know, again, how you sit, you know, as a more senior manager. I think these are all real problems that come into play.
It is. Yeah. And do you know who I saw in that situation? We were speaking about him earlier, Tom. And he was in that exact same situation. He became the manager with many of the team members he had been at a peer level with prior to that. And he did a fantastic job, but it wasn't easy. There's no two ways about it. It's because, as you said, somebody else in the team couldn't feel like they should have gotten it. Therefore, subconsciously, they're hoping their colleague is going to fail in the job, because it, at some psychological level, makes them feel better about the fact that they didn't get it. It's almost like it's a, see, you know, you should have gone with me. And so therefore they'll always on the surface, they'll play the game, right? I'm here to support you, buddy, right? Mm-hmm. But underneath it, they may be working counter to their interests. So you could be a great coach, but when you have that going on, I'm not suggesting that happened there, but I have seen it happen. And so that can be a real problem. I do think that it's better all around if you're a new coach and you're learning those skills of management for the first time, you're better off with a different team. You really are. That
Yeah, I can see that.
you know, if they're your buddies, they're your friends, and now you're their coach, manager, supervisor, that's a lot to lay on top of somebody trying to get to grips with a
Yeah.
new skill set and grow within that. I think it's a mistake. I see it happening, but it takes a huge strength of character to be able to push through that, I believe, which has got nothing really to do with the coaching side of things. It's to do with character.
Yep. Yep. And even just the overall approach, right? And character can drive the approach in those situations, right? So, there's situations, and this can go with, the scenario that you just described here, Mark, where, you've got I'm a peer today, but now I'm a manager of my former peers, and I've got to provide that level of coaching. It's almost similar to where we were talking earlier about, you're identifying the right people to coach, right? Well, you really need to coach everybody on your team, but if you identify your A players, B players, the most time you should be spending is with your B players. But when you're with your A players, it doesn't mean they don't need coaching, but the approach is probably a little bit different. It's more along the lines of that collaborative strategy session, right? You're not going into a situation where you're basically saying you need to do this to improve the advancement of this deal. Maybe it's posing it in a question, right? So maybe it's something along the lines of, you need to get more decision makers at the table for this deal. Maybe it's asking the question, what do you think about trying to prospect other decision makers, other members of the power base, and how can I help you? Maybe we can go in this together, right? So it's almost like you're shoulder to shoulder with the individuals, the A players, or even your former peers. That can help you from a character standpoint and help you fight through that scenario that we just described, where it's maybe there's some animosity, if you will.
Yeah, I wonder also is the part ego on behalf of the manager plays in undermining coaching. And what I mean by that is that I can imagine some people who have an attachment to their self-perception, their sense of self as a rescuer. So that there's an ego stroke in this, that the rep comes to them, hey boss, I'm struggling with this, need some help. And then the manager's going, here's how I did it.
Yeah.
And there is an ego playing that, there's no question about it. And it's hard then to step back from that and say, well, what ideas do you have? Versus, okay, here's what you need to do, right? And I'm wondering how much that also can undermine the goal of effective coaching. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
I think that the idea that your organization decides coaching is important. Starts to, I'm not just chasing the deal, I'm also growing my people. And now those things are both in my mind as that opportunity comes in. I'll fast forward. The being the rescuer doesn't scale. So the sooner you get through that, the better. And then you start growing your people, and that's what we're trying to get to. And again, I guess my last comment where I wanted to go with new managers is any tool that solicits feedback ahead of time and actually puts raw data in front of the folks that are being coached makes my conversation a little easier, because we're already kind of talking about the important things to both of us, and we have a shared set of facts, I guess I'll call it, that we're working off of. So it becomes less of me telling you how I think you're doing and more about us reviewing things together. So I think if you're in a spot where you're trying to take over for somebody, you don't want to have to explain things to them as well. You want to work off some shared data.
Sure, understand. You guys are in the business of putting structure and measurements around the coaching process. If that's my simplified understanding of what you do, right? Is that then saying that informal, unstructured coaching is ineffective, or is it just that you're saying, it's effective, it's just not scalable? You can't really manage it beyond one or two individuals.
Yeah, and you really can't do it when you're remote, by the way.
I was going to say, it's even more difficult today, right? You don't get the drive-bys in the office anymore, or even traveling with your reps. And it's there's unstructured coaching, and yes, it's always going to happen. And I think it's also it's an important component of what we are as an operations. But if you don't institute a structured program and have discipline around it, you're missing the mark and the opportunity to really drive performance improvement.
Yeah. I asked the question as devil's advocate, but actually my own view on it is I have tried coaching a few times where I was asked to do it, and I gave up doing it because as an individual, I'm really low on structure personally.
Yeah.
I generally, I don't write things down. I've learned that it's better if I do, but it's not in my nature to do that and to apply structure to different things. And what I would find is that I would have a coaching conversation, usually as an external, not internally within my own business, but for a client company. And then we might have another conversation a month later, and I wouldn't be good at keeping notes. What I used to do was push it back on them and say, okay, based on our conversation today, I want you to send me your takeaways and your notes. But if they didn't do that, or they didn't follow up on that following session, I would have no clue where we left off, what we were discussing, where we needed to go, or anything like that. And I'm still that to this day. Like if I do a training, there's a company I do a training class once a month with, but I record the class for the very simple reason is that when I'm preparing for the next one is I listen back to what we covered on the last one. So yeah. I'm actually a huge believer in the idea of putting structure and putting notes and having a place to go that manages that process. So it's great to see you guys doing that. It's needed.
Yeah. It is needed. It's important. It's kind of like it's like exercise, right? We all know it's important, it's healthy, it's good for us, and you got to get up, go to the gym before you get to work, or make sure you're packed for the gym so you can head there on the way home from work, right? But it's a discipline. We all know it's good for you, it's healthy, it's a discipline, and you got to have drive to make sure that it happens, right? Yeah. I think it was what was it, the Sandler 7-step of the methodology, right? One of the steps was, how do you identify, you assess, and then you identify and develop new behaviors. But how do you execute those new behaviors? And I think there was, it was like a habit forming step, right? It was like step 3 or step 4, where you're repeating it every day. That new behavior that you learn that you want to develop, that organization structural behavior that you want to learn, Paul, you're repeating it every day for, what was it, 21 days or 20 days, or it was something, but you repeat that back to yourself every day. You report back as to how it's affecting you, how it's improving throughout that whole time until it becomes a habit forming, if you will, and then it's second nature.
Yeah, and that's the difficult bit.
By the way, if you want some coaching around your organization, your structure, Mark can help you with that.
I tell you, ever the salesman, eh?
I'll throw another comment on coaching. I mean, we all have this expectation, just like you said, like we're all good drivers. Like my expectation that, my rep's going to walk in here and 30 minutes later, they are going to be like, my problems are solved. My career path is clear. I feel good about my marriage, and I'm on my way to hitting quota here. I mean, what's really possible in 30 minutes? And kind of what, my first trip to the gym, Mike, maybe we've got to start with a couple of push-ups before you throw me on the big weight bench. So yeah, I just think there's an expectation, a patience that you'll have to have with yourself and your team and everybody involved if this is important to you.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think there's an expectation, there's a silver bullet mentality.
Yeah.
And that if I just go into this coaching session, the clouds will lift and everything will be clear and everything will be fine. And what we forget, and to go back to your point, Mike, is that there's a behavioral change required on the back end. And that takes a huge amount of effort. I mean, we see it in the training side of things where we'd have ongoing training, 90 minutes, 2 hours every week with teams. We used to do this where we take in reps and put them through the process. And what would happen is you get to week 8, week 9, to a point where the reps now realize that they weren't just showing up for fun. This wasn't about knowing what a technique was, but this was about changing my own habits and my own behaviors. And then what would happen is 9 out of 10 of them would go back to their bosses and they'd say, love the training, Paul's a great guy, but you know what? Our world is a little bit different. We need something different for us. And then the managers would buy that bullshit and come back and say, you know, the reps feel like maybe they need something different now, a little bit of a change. Changed all that now. Managers must play or we don't do it. Managers have to be involved the whole way along, because if they're not, they don't know when reps bring them that excuse. Is it an excuse or is it real? And so when the manager participates, that they see, no. This is what we have to do as a business. We need to figure out, and we need to be held accountable to this. We need to have the discipline to make those changes in behavior. Otherwise, it's all a waste of time. And I think that's where coaching comes in my own view, is part accountability. But I think maybe, and I'm curious to know your experience, is that maybe we don't do enough of a job up front to say, look guys, there's pain involved in this.
Yeah.
All the way. Opening up, being vulnerable is not comfortable. But you think that's bad. Wait till you get on the back end, and now we're going to be held accountable for making the changes that you identify that you need to make.
Yeah,
and that's when a lot of people disappear.
Yeah, it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon, and it's ongoing, right? It's continuous improvement. If you don't embrace continuous improvement, regardless of what level you're at, how much experience you have, you're gonna get stuck, right? And what was good for you yesterday is not going to be good for you tomorrow. But from a coaching perspective too, I've always had more success of again, being more collaborative with the team members and recognizing and setting that expectation to your earlier point, Mark's earlier point. I don't have the silver bullet that's going to make you a superstar from, to the next level. And by the way, I'm also thinking that I'm going to learn as much from you and your experiences in these sessions that hopefully that you're going to learn from me, but together we'll continue to grow. And then making sure that we're focused in the right areas for coaching on an individual basis is extremely important.
Do you know what I'd love to see? You're going to think I'm mad when I say this. And I'll be straight up, I don't know your tool, right? If there was a flag in it, that if I were the coach and now I've got a coachee, that is a little flag that I can, it's like 3 little check boxes. One says prisoner, one says pip, one says star. Because that plays to my experience that there's 3 types of individuals who get coaching. There is the natural learner, the ones who want to push themselves. They're always going to be great. They come into you as an A player already. You're not trying to coach a C into a B or a B into an A. They're A's and they want to be super A's. And they're open and they submit to the process. Then you have people who are there because they've been put there. They're on a pip maybe, and they're prisoners. So I'm here because there was a gun to my head. And then there's a third category. There may be more, by the way. These are just ones that spring to my mind. Sure. And maybe I'm being over cynical on this. There's a third category of people who engage with coaching when they know they have a big deal and they've had a couple of red flags around it. And they want to build some support and they don't want to be alone when the ship goes down.
Yeah.
And so they start to engage with coaching early in the process. And again, I have no scientific basis for that whatsoever, by the way. That's why I'd be curious to know, as a coaching community, if we were to identify people's starting point, to know how long they engaged with it, how, what their experience was, etc. It's just a personal, I'd love to see it. I'm sure it's not possible, but it would be interesting.
We can certainly score your cards if you'd like, if you're kind of trying to do that. But I'm going to come to it from a different place in terms of kind of where does that coaching come from? And you're pointing to people that may or may not want coaching. There's just a few that kind of are looking forward to it. And so let me go a different perspective. I've got 10 people on my team. the worst kind of we skip coaching. There's no coaching, then we go from there to, kind of a quick, how are the kids? How's that deal? Kind of high five and a couple of questions and they're out of there, kind of lack of substance happens there. And then we go into the, kind of something more data driven, more contextual around kind of performance. And we start to have that conversation. And then Mike gets into that more collaborative type conversation. And you're trying to get everybody into this collaborative space, but at least with a structured process, I'm at least here, where we're gonna both show up. And I'll give you another version of this. When I used to travel, my team used to travel, a weekly one-on-one. We were lucky if we were meeting twice a month, versus now when turns out our schedules are pretty, we're able to meet almost every week. And this back and forth where we can do some of this in email, kind of just level setting really does. There's a regularness and a repetition to it that does build over time, to Mike's point. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of the game. I think in the last one of the things I saw you say, we spend way too much time on our low performers, right? We got to spend more time on our mid and top performers. And so, and I think coaching, to your point, maybe drives us into these are the folks that need help. These are the red flags. These are the ones I'm engaged with, versus something that's a little bit more structural that everybody gets it. We're all getting a version of it, and we're really trying something here. So that's what
I would even
go ahead. Sorry.
I would suggest even building the team that, around coachability, right? When we hire new reps, we'll identify where they're at on the coachability scale, right? Whether you're in an interview process and I'm providing you a mock presentation that you're going to provide back to me, or maybe myself and Mark and a few other execs as part of the team. And then we're gonna provide you coaching on the presentation, ask you to come back and do it again. Did you receive that coaching and implement the coaching into your next version, right? I think is a key indicator, but it's important to build the team. I believe that everybody needs to be coachable, right? If you're not coachable, then you're really not willing to work together as a team along with your manager. And I think that there's going to be a challenge. And then going back to the A, B, and C players, I'm a big believer. If you're a C player, you're on the scale of skill and will. You're low. You don't have the willingness or desire. You don't have the skills. You're probably in the wrong role. And as a manager, I've got to look to reassign or prune, right? And then the A players on the other side, they've got high skill, high will. They need coaching, but it's a different level. It's more of that collaborative, strategy sessions and making sure that we're there together. Those B players, they either have high skills and low desire, if you will, or low skill and high desire, right? And then you coach around that. If they have low desire, you got to learn what makes them tick as individuals and motivate them, because they've got the skills to be an A player, but they don't have that drive. How do you really get that drive in that individual so they leverage the skills, and then vice versa, right? So maybe they've got high drive, but they're low experience, no skills. They're probably the greener, less experienced resources that they need to be trained on sales strategy. They have to have experiences. We develop a co-pilot system where we put those individuals with our A players, put them in the cockpit while the A players are flying the planes, and they're learning from those A players as well as the managers, right, through other coaching sessions. And then the A players are there in the cockpit when those B players take over the reins and fly the plane as well, right? So there's different programs that you can leverage, but really spending the time with those B players to make them A players, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck.
So that throws up an interesting question then in terms of the type of person, the type of coach that you need. For example, you could have somebody who is performing subpar because they don't have the skill, they don't have the experience, and therefore they need to be coached, and you're exploring their blind spots and pointing them to solutions and so on, and you're supporting that technical growth in terms of expertise and skill. And then you'll have people who have that and have demonstrated, but for whatever reason in their life, they've lost their mojo. Maybe they've lost a sense of purpose, drive, direction. They might be going through a breakup in a relationship. They may have a kid who's sick. And so therefore it's an external factor. And I'm wondering is if the type of coach needs to be different for let's say, performance, life coaching, if you like, versus might be a more tech. For example, if I'm to coach somebody on a sales methodology, then I need to be really conversant with that sales methodology. I need to be able to put people into role plays, and I need to be able to swap roles in the role plays and play both sides. But that's a very different thing from somebody who's just needs to be listened to, understood, have a shoulder to cry on, for example. And I'm wondering is if what you see in that sense, can they be the same person? Should they be different?
I know Mark's got some comments there, but I would say it absolutely can be the same person, but it's often different people, right? And I think the coaches themselves have to be humble enough to identify a need, whether it's more of a life skill or more of a technical skill that the rep needs. And recognize that, you know what, I know this individual needs this skill. I'm not the best person, but I know who to pair them up with, right? And ask others to get involved with coaching. I think surrounding reps with multiple coaches is very important, because not every coach is going to have all the skill sets to drive new behaviors and improve behaviors with each rep.
Mm-hmm. Then I'm also curious to know, why is it just sales we're talking about? You never hear this in marketing circles, engineers. Why is it sales? What's so special about sales?
Yeah, well, I don't know if marketing gets much training. I don't know if engineering gets much training. So I think maybe it's an extension of some of the work you're doing, Paul, where we know we want our skills to increase. I'm going to switch myself. Not all of us selected sales as a career path when we were 4, when our friends were selecting that they want to be firefighters, right? You know, and it's a career that we find ourselves in that we may not have been properly trained for, or that the resources didn't exist for. So kind of here we are, you know, it's an industry that's changing. I mean, to your credit, I mean, maybe we've just realized, or maybe we're just trying to, you know, we're at the front end as sellers, that we need every advantage we can get. And, you know, the latest, greatest training, you know, and good coaching for your team, gets them better and helps them through some of these challenges too, that we experience as sellers.
Yeah. I think I've answered my own question. I think I figured it out, right? So here's what it is. You get good training if you come to our organization. Then we're going to coach you. And if all that fails, go to marketing.
Marketing, there you go. I don't know. Marketing.
You see, that's why they don't get the coaching. They've already had it and they failed. Now they're in marketing, right?
Well, I don't know if I would suggest that. We've got a director of marketing that's a fantastic coach, and she drives fantastic behaviors throughout our whole organization, not just her marketing team.
I'm only kidding. I absolutely have massive respect for marketing. We just like to josh each other. So, oh Lord, guys, I know we're running on time, and I had a couple of other quick questions. One was around the use of. So I don't like calling it a tool, because I'm sure it's a lot more than that. It's a process, it's a framework, it's a method, right? But I'm sticking with simple tool. Okay. But there are other tools out there, like say Gong as a tool that's often used for coaching. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that and how it might dovetail into your own solutions.
Yeah, we support all coaching, right? You're to your point, none of us get enough coaching. And so I think Gong is really strong in the area of very specific call coaching. And, you know, to the kind of, you know, what did you see in this call? I want to go through this and I want to talk about this. You can score the calls. There's a lot of insight in terms of, you know, how much did you talk? How much did I talk? Transitions. That data is invaluable. So you should buy that too. But at the end of the day, you know, you kind of gave us this hierarchy of, you know, do I even know what I'm doing? Am I tactically strong? Am I strategically strong? You know, am I an active member of the community inside this company? There's a lot more that needs to happen between. It slides more into deal coaching on that side.
Yeah, I would have thought it would help as well to give you some initial insights that as the coach, I'm going to get some data before I even have that conversation with the rep.
Yeah.
And that data allows me to get a sense of their self-awareness, because I think that's a hugely a much underrated skill set when it comes to being coachable and being trainable, is a sense of where we exist and how we come off and how we're approaching. I think Gong and tools like that can do it, because I remember a few years ago I was with it was a head of this technology company, and he was telling me about this guy who'd come out to call on him, sales guy, and he said the guy wouldn't shut up. It was awful. He drove me crazy. I couldn't wait to see the back of him. And he mentioned the guy's name, and I'm inside my head, I know him. I only met him last week. Long story short, I meet this sales rep a few weeks later on, and I said, I heard you were out with, let's call him Mike. I heard you were out with Mike the other day. Call him. Yeah, I said, how did you get on? Oh, fantastic. And he went on. It reminded me, we're kind of coming full circle of the managers who think they're doing great coaching and the reps who think it's rubbish. But that's, I kind of illustrate in the sense of self-awareness. I think you're seeing it in the management survey. It's certainly there in all of us to some extent. And maybe that's what coaching does best. It heightens our sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
What we do with that is some people will take it forward and turn it into something positive. Other people will look to blame somebody else, and I guess they're not coachable in the long term. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff, guys, I wanted to cover. I think it's been really, really fascinating insights. Is there anything you feel that you'd like to, and just in terms of imagining that, that we've got a lot of frontline managers, sales directors watching, listening in on these, and imagine that they're maybe sitting on the fence a little bit in terms of coaching. They know what it is, big picture, but they really haven't invested or committed to it. What would you say to them?
I would start off with that you're missing an opportunity to really elevate the performance of your team. If you don't have a disciplined program and focus on doing this, and you understand what it is, but at least you think you do, but you're really not disciplined to make it happen with a regular cadence, you're missing the opportunity to improve the performance of your team. That's the first thing that I would say. Then I would go back to, effective coaching is discipline with a regular cadence. Maximize your time, meaning identify the right people to spend most of the coaching time with. And those are typically your B players that you're trying to elevate to the A game. And then be prepared, both the coach and the coachee, right? Set the expectations, be prepared when you go into those coaching sessions, and make sure that the rep is prepared as well.
Love it. Is there anything you'd add to that, Mark?
Maybe the first place to start is if you think about really good coaching you've experienced and really not so good coaching you've experienced, and kind of how did that make you feel and where'd you go with that? And, if you can tie your experience to a coach that changed your life, this becomes a noble thing to do. And I think that's always the goal here.
What's the best way for people to get in contact with AscentCloud?
www.ascentcloud.io, and you'll find all of us there, and we'd love to help. It doesn't cost anything to talk to us. So if you're
LinkedIn?
interested in the topic,
You guys welcome LinkedIn connections, I presume?
Of course, absolutely.
Super. I'll make sure I'll put your LinkedIn in the description below. I'll put your links to that as well.
Please do.
Mike, Mark, it's been fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I think the message is clear, that the evidence is in, the jury's in. Coaching makes an impact, and that putting structure on that and getting it right is a surefire way to grow the performance of your company and impact the bottom line. Fair summary?
Perfectly said,
Well
Paul.
put. Well put. Thanks for having us, Paul.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you, guys.